null, what we are doing, I2, we have to take the maximum item, the item which has the maximum support count. So we are starting with I2. Before starting this tree, we have to sort this according to the count, support count. So if you sort this, what I will get, I will start with the I2, I1 and I5. So like this it moves. So I am sorting it according to the count. So I am giving the tree as I2, I1 and I5. Then according to the transaction, second transaction I2, I4. So I2 is connected here. So what I am doing, I2 is connected to I4. Then I2 is, third transaction is I2, I3. So I am connecting I2 to I3. This is the third transaction, and the fourth transaction is I1, I2, I4. So I1, I2, I4, here I1 is there. So according to this, I2, I1 and I4 is already there, but here I1, I2, I4, it's already connected. Yes, next 500, I1, I3. So see here 500, the transaction 500 is I1, I3. Since I have the path from I2 to I1 and I1 to I3, what I am doing is I am creating a new node called I1 here. Then I am connecting I1 with the I3. Since I1 is connected to I2, I1 is in the path of I2, I1, I5, I am creating a new right hand side node and I am connecting I1 with the I3. Now we said in the support count as 6 here. So I am changing here as 5 and putting as 1 here, because we have created a new node here. So here once and here 5 times. So along with the I2, it is coming 5 times. Okay. Next. So I1 is directly connected to I3, we are done. Then I2 is directly connected to I3. Okay. So I2 is directly connected to I3, that is already there because here we have done. So same thing is done here. Then I1 to I3, again I1 to I3 is already we have done. So this is also done. And I1, I2, I3, I5. So if I take I1, I2, I3, I5, I2 is there, I1 is there, and I5 is there. So what I have to do now? It should start from I2, I1 and to I3, then again to I5. So I am going I2, I1, I3 and I5. So it came like this. So this is how we have to create the tree. So just I have explained you with the example. You can see the detailed tree here in the next slide. Yes. Yes, see here, this is the tree, whatever we have seen there. See, according to the transaction, see, this is the transaction 1, I2, I1, I3. See, this is the transaction 1, I2, I1, I5. Since it is frequent, I2 is in the first. Then we saw the few transactions. We'll move on there and I'll explain once. Then we went to this. This is the next transaction, that is I2, I4, then I1, I3 and I5. I2, I1, I3 and I4, I5. And here we are seeing the next transaction, that is I2, I1 and I4, that also was there. Then this is I2, I3, this is I2, I4. And if you take, this is what I said, right hand side one path will be there, that is null I1 to I3. So this is how we have constructed FP tree. Now our ultimate aim, that is we have to find the frequent patterns, that is the ultimate aim. So with the help of this FP tree, we are going to find the frequent patterns. So first what we are going to do, we are going to take the least one So that is I5. So I am taking I5 here. Okay, so I5 is taken. Then for this we are writing the all the transactions with the I5. So we have only two transactions with the I5, that is I2, I1, I5, and I2, I1, I3 and I5. So here once the I5 is, see here I5, there are two transactions which we are saying with the item 5. One is I1, I1, I2, I2, I1 and I5, that is I2, I1 and I5, this path, and the other transaction is I2, I1 and I3, this path. So here once I5 is coming, instead of putting I5 here, we have to make it as 1. So instead of putting I5, I am making it as 1. All these are the other items in the path for which has I5. So I2, I1, I5, instead of I5 I am putting 1, and I2, I1, I3, instead of 5 I am putting, item 5 I am putting 1, because the count is 1 here, so I am putting 1. Then what is the second step? After this what we are doing is I2, how many times it is occurring. So here 1, here 1, so twice. In the I5 path, how many times I2 are occurring? Item 2 is occurring. So here once, here one. So what I am writing, the count of I2 in the path of I1, I5, item 5. Then how many times I1 is occurring in the path of I5, item 5? I1 here once, here once. So twice I am putting. Then what about I3? Item 3 is occurring only once in the, along with the I5 or in the path of item 5. So since this I3 is less than the minimum support threshold, I am not writing here, because whichever is coming as minimum, less than minimum support threshold, I am not writing here. So I am going to consider only two items, whichever is coming with item 5, whichever is brought together with the item 5, that is item 2 and item 1. Okay, that is done. Now we have to generate the frequent patterns. So see here, so I2, we have to write these items along with the item 5. So what is there? Item 2 is there. So I am writing item 2, item 5. How many times it is occurring? Twice it is occurring. Here twice. I2, I5 twice. And I1, I5, how many times it is occurring? It is, see here, I1 twice. So I1, I5 twice. And I1, I2, I1, I5. So how many times I2, I1 and I5? This is the other combination, that is I2, I1 and I5. So here it is 2. So totally how many times? That we have to write. Here I2, I5 twice. I1, because I1 is occurring twice. Since they are occurring twice, I am writing here as I2, I1, I5 also twice. So these are the patterns generated out of the item 5. Next comes I4, item 4. So for the item 4, what are the transaction, what are the possible transactions in that path we have to select now. So if you go for the item 4, yes, this is the item 4. We have I2, I1. We have I2, I1. See here, what is this path? I4, I1, I2. Yes, here it is there. Then where another I4 is there, here another I4 is there, I4, I1. So there are two paths. So I am writing both the paths, whichever is occurring together with the, both the items, whichever is occurring together with the item 4. That is item 2, item 1 and item 4. This is one transaction. Then item 2 and item 4. This is the two transaction. So if you want to check, you can check with the transaction slide also. If we are confusing, if you feel that it is confused, it is confusing to see the path, you can go with the transaction table. See here, wherever I4 is there, see I4 is here, and in two transactions only I4 is there. So I2, I1 and I1, I2 and I4. So I can take these two transactions and I am writing here. Clear? See, I1, I2, I4 and I2, I4. That's it. Next. So how many times I2 is occurring? Twice. So I am writing I2 as twice. I1 is occurring only once in the item set, in these two item set. Since it is less than minimum support threshold, I am not writing I1 here. Then So how can we combine the item 4 with the other item? Like I2, I4. How many times it is occurring? Twice. Because I2 is occurring twice. So I am writing it as 2. Clear? Then we will go for I3. So in how many transactions I3 are occurring? We will see here. See, I3 are occurring here in I2, I3. Then I1, I3. Again I1 and I3 repeated. So I1, I3, I2, I3. So we will take it as 2. And here I1, I2, I3, I5 and I1, I2, I3. So 4 times it is repeated. Okay. So we have to write all the things. See, I2, I1. Then I2, I1, I3. Then I2 with I3. Then I1 with I3. Since I2, I1, I3, I5 already it is taken. So I am leaving that. See, I1, I2, I3, I5 is already taken. So I am leaving that since it is minimum support threshold. Yes. See how many times I2 is repeated here. 1 and here 2. So here 4 and I1, since twice this item set is repeated. See here this item I2, I1 and again how many times I3 is repeated, we will see here. Yes. I2, I3, see here once is there, then here I1, I3, here I2, I3, twice I2, I3 is repeated. So I am giving here as I2, I3 twice. See, I2 twice. Clear? I2 is repeated twice. Instead of I3 I am putting as twice because twice the same data item set is repeated. This data set is repeated or item set is repeated. Again I1, I2, I3 is repeated twice. So I am putting here as 2. And I1, I3, this item set is also repeated twice. So I am putting as I1 instead of I3 I am putting the value 2. Then what I have to do, how many times I2 is repeated? Now I have to check 1, 2. So here twice, right? It means that I2, I1 is repeated. The entire data set is repeated twice. So we have to consider I2 as 2. Here 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. Then I1 twice are there because twice this item set is repeated. So I1 should be considered as 2. So what we have to do, I1 is 2. Here I1 is not there. So I am going to write I1 as 2 only here. Then here it is not with this I1 is occurring together with the I2 and I3. So here we have mentioned as 2 and separately we have to write this I1. Why we are writing separately? Because this I1 is occurring only with the I3, not with I1, I2 and I3. So we are writing this I1 twice because I1, I3 is repeated twice in the transaction. See here 1, 2. Twice I1, I3 is repeated. So I am writing twice. See here I1 twice. That's why I am writing here also how many times I1 is repeated? Twice. Along with the I3 it is twice. Again, now what we have to do? We have to write these rules along with the item name. So what is the item name? I3. So I2, I3, comma, I2, I3, again 4, I2, I3, 4, because I2 is 4 and I3 is also 4. Then I1 along with the item name. Simply I am writing this item with this whatever we have written. So I1, I3, 4. Then I2, I1, I3. So I2, I1, I3 it is 2. Clear? Next we are going for the item 1. Here the item 1 is, see here item 1, we will see in the table. Here the item 1 is, how many times it is repeated? 6 times. So everywhere we have to see this. So I2, I3 along with Yes. So I1 is repeated. Check here I1. Where is I1? I1 is here, and I1 is occurring with the I2. So I1 is occurring with the I2. How many times this I2 are occurring along with the I2 is, I1 is occurring along with the I2 is 4 times. See here, we have written 4 times. I1 is occurring along with the item 2 for the 4 times. So I am writing instead of I1 here 4. Clear? Then so I2 4, the same thing, because how many ever times it is repeated, I am writing here 4, and I2, I1, I4. So what is the item here? I1. So I am writing it as I1 and I am finishing this. So this will be the final frequent patterns generated. So in the a priori algorithm, we have generated with the help of the candidate set. Here we are just taking the pattern and we are generating the frequent item set. Hope it would be clear. Thank you.